Welcome to season 14 of the Parenting Aces podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Stone, and I apologize right now for the poor video quality. Hopefully, the audio quality is okay. I am recording this outside, and trying to get the lighting right is a little tricky. But anyway, I'm super excited for this episode. We are talking once again with Bode and Scott Campbell, a father-son duo from Minnesota who have been on the podcast before discussing their journey through this whole junior tennis thing. And now Bode is getting ready to graduate high school and move on to the next phase of his tennis journey. And they reached out to me and said, how would you like us to come on and talk about what's been going on, how the recruiting went, and all of that? And I was like, absolutely, this is gold. So I'm really thrilled to bring them back for you guys. I will have a link to our last podcast that we did together, which was about a year ago, in the show notes. And I'll also have contact information for Scott in the show notes because he loves helping other tennis families just like I do, and is happy to talk to you guys as you figure out the ins and outs of this whole junior and college tennis thing. So now I want you to enjoy my conversation with Scott and with Bode. I want you to be sure to check out the show notes on ParentingAces.com. Be sure you're following us on socials. And if I can be of service through a one-on-one consult, I hope you will book that with me as well. All of that info is on our website. Now, here we go with Scott and Bode Campbell. Bode and Scott, welcome back to the podcast. It is so exciting to have an opportunity to check in with you guys again. And as we were talking offline, it's been almost exactly a year since our last podcast together. So I'm super excited to hear what's been going on, Bode, in your journey, and Scott, in your journey as a parent to this young man who has been working toward this dream of playing college tennis.
Well, thanks, Lisa. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
So before we jump in case people missed our last episode, which, by the way, I will link to in the show notes, can y'all just kind of give us a brief background about your tennis journey, how you came to find Parenting Aces, and then we're going to kind of dive into some of the detail. Bode, you want to start? How old were you when you first picked up a racket?
Yeah, I started playing when I was probably 4 or 5. My dad got all three of us kids into it when we were young. Had a racket in my hand for a while, and started kind of taking it more serious when I got into the juniors and like 14, 16s, and then really decided to focus in on tennis late 16s, and that was when I kind of knew I wanted to play college tennis. So.
And Scott, how about you? What made you introduce your kids to tennis?
Yeah, so I grew up playing tennis as well, and had an opportunity to play in high school and wanted to play in college as well. So I ended up playing Division III college tennis in Indiana at DePaul. And then just as my wife Kari and I, we live here in Minnesota, and we have these 3 great kids, and we introduced them to a number of different sports, including tennis. And over the course of time, they've each had their own experience with tennis. Obviously, the journey with Bode we'll talk about here today, but it's been a part of our family in terms of what we do and staying really active.
So, at the risk of this turning into an infomercial, which I do not want it to be, can I ask you how you first came across Parenting Aces? And again, I want to encourage people to listen to our last episode together, because we talked about kind of how you've utilized the resources that Parenting Aces offers up until that place. But now we're coming to the end of this junior tennis thing, and I think it's kind of cool to recap.
Yeah, it's the good place to go. So I'll use this phrase that I used last year. I knew enough to be dangerous, and when it came to junior tennis, because I played it, I actually taught tennis for a few years right out of college as well to other junior tennis players. So knew enough about it, but I also recognized that there was a lot I didn't know that has changed and evolved, everything from USTA levels and how kids trained and how they made decisions on what they wanted to do with juniors. So I just started seeking out what information was out there, and I came across your podcast, and I think that I got through half of the first podcast and like, this is what I needed. And so I went back and listened to all the other ones you've done. I can't remember how many seasons ago it was, Lisa. I'll date myself, but that's how I came about it, was recognizing that there was a void in my knowledge in order to support the kids as they were going through this journey. And so Parenting Aces has filled a lot of that void with the content that you provide.
Well, thank you for that. And Bode, I know, last time we chatted, we talked a little bit about how you feel your dad has done in the tennis parent job, and you were saying that you felt like he's really learned a lot over the course of this journey, as well as you learning a lot over the course of this journey. Can you kind of recap for us what your relationship with him looks like? And I don't know, my computer's doing something very weird right now. That was strange. Anyway, can you talk a little bit about how your relationship with him has evolved through this process?
Yeah, so kind of like we talked about last time, he's been obviously my dad, but then also a coach on the court. He's been working with us for a while, ever since I first picked up a racket. So yeah, he's kind of been out there when we'll go out early mornings and be playing, against him and hitting a bunch of balls and stuff like that. And I think it's kind of just evolved to more of a it's more of a son coach relationship. I don't really know if that makes sense, but where he goes to the line and doesn't cross it, I think, with tennis. And that's a big thing that in junior tennis I've seen a lot, is parents will, cross that line, especially in a sport like tennis, an individual sport like that. And I just think that he does a great job of, balancing that player and or coach and dad relationship. And that's been pretty great.
I love that. Okay, you guys, my computer is being very weird at the moment, and I apologize. I'm not sure what is going on with it, but I think we're still fine. And so I'm going to just keep talking because I'm not sure what else to do. This is very bizarre. Anyway, I don't know why I can't see y'all, but I think I can still hear you. So I want to talk about some of the resources that each of you has discovered through your interaction with Parenting Aces. And maybe Scott, let's start with you, and then we'll move over to Bode on that one.
Sure, absolutely. In fact, I'll follow up on what Bode was talking about. I mean, to a certain extent, I think I am a coach because I can go out and hit with them a bit, but also recognize that Bode has other coaches that are in his tennis life that are, more younger and can keep up with them. And so I just recognize that that's also a part of it too, where I think sometimes a parent coaches, that's the only coach they have. In this case, we've been able to work with other coaches. In fact, one of the coaches he's worked with, to answer your question, is someone that we were able to get connected with via Parenting Aces. And so we live here in Minnesota, and in Minnesota there's a smaller group, a core group of higher level tennis players, as opposed to Florida, South Florida, California. So it's a little bit different. And what we found is that it was apparent that it would be healthy to have to be in that environment where some of the players that are playing year-round outside, where some of the coaches who gravitate to that area are. So we were connected with a gentleman named Todd Whittam a handful of years ago, and have visited his tennis. He doesn't call it an academy, so I got to watch my language there. But his tennis coaching arena that he has. And so that was actually, I think, an important part of the development, because we were able to understand, where Bode was in his tennis. And if he was interested in trying to go here, then here's kind of what that would look like to train like that. Not that we weren't seeing that as much here in Minnesota, but half the time you're inside here and court time's at a premium, so you can't just go out and hit, it's not as easy. So that was a resource that we found via Parenting Aces that was really, really helpful. I'll say over the course of time too, I've listened to, not every podcast, but especially the ones that seem to be relevant for where we are currently or where we think we might be in our journey. And that's been really helpful as well, to understand like what the president of ITA on, and he was able last year to describe, like, so what is college tennis starting to look like, and what is this house rule, and what might that look like if this goes through and that goes through. And it's just information that if you have a student that is interested in playing college tennis, you just kind of need it. And it's not always easy to find it, and this has always been a great repository for that information. So those are a couple of examples. I could give a couple more, but I don't know if you have any questions on that.
No, I appreciate that. And, one of the things that one of the messages that I hope comes across, and sometimes I'm nice about it and sometimes I'm less nice about it, but is that there's a lot of misinformation that continually circulates about how to do things in junior tennis, how to go through the college recruiting process, what is happening in college tennis, and how does that impact juniors. And one of my missions has always been to try and bring the right information, the correct information to families so that they can make informed decisions, as opposed to relying on hearsay and misinformation that and this has been going on since time immemorial, where this misinformation continues to circulate, and it's not with malintent. People think they are passing along helpful information, but sometimes it's not fact checked. Sometimes somebody hears something from somebody and it's like that game telephone where, the message just gets changed a little bit each time it's transmitted. And so I hope that the information that we are a repository for, as you put it, Scott, is correct information and useful information.
Totally agree that's critical. And in this case here, when you bring the guests that you bring on to Parenting Aces and they have the credentials, it's really helpful to just hear directly from them and have you ask the 5 questions we're all thinking about that you're able to ask and get that information back from, in that case, the ITA president. In fact, if I recall correctly, the timing of your podcast it coincided with Kalamazoo, and everybody at Kalamazoo was talking about what is college tennis going to look like specifically in the D1 realm, and what will the house rule go through or not, and if it does, what will that do to? And it was you couldn't turn a corner where parents were having some level of conversation about it, and I was like, you need to listen to this podcast, and this is going to be really helpful because you're going to hear directly from them. So anyway, that's just I think the timing of that was right. It might have been just right before or after, but it was in that realm because Battle of Texas was going on too.
No, it was right before, because I was at the girls' national hard courts down in San Diego, and the same conversations were happening. And it was great because I could say to them, here's a QR code to the podcast episode. You're going to hear from the people who know this stuff. Please listen and get informed so that you can make the right choices for your family.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So not only great content, but great timing.
that one was lucky, but yeah, I'll take that. So Bode, let's turn it over to you. You had the goal of playing college tennis, as you mentioned. And do you want to share with us your big news about that?
Yeah, so I recently made my decision to play Division I college tennis at Xavier University in Cincinnati. And I was super excited to get, that long process of college and stressful process of college recruiting, over with and kind of get that monkey off the back. But yeah, I mean, I can't be more happy for where I'm at right now.
That's so awesome. And can you talk a little bit about some of the resources that you've utilized over the past couple of years to help guide you through that recruiting process and what that looked like for you?
Yeah, so we started out, kind of obviously very new to this tennis recruiting and never gone through something like this, and looked for the experts who did. So we reached out to Danielle McNamara, who my dad, found through Parenting Aces, and she kind of just laid the groundwork for us on, what this looks like, her being a college coach in the past, and she knew it, front and back how all this worked. And she had me, making spreadsheets and getting, the mass emails sent out and all that. And that was just a great start because I had no idea what to do or what to expect from any of this. And, she did. So that was great. And that was the one that kind of kickstarted I remember my first talk with her or so was when I was at Kalamazoo. I was in the hotel and I was like, how do I, communicate with these coaches that are, watching my matches or that are, a few courts down? Like, do I go up and talk to them and, figuring out all that. And she was a great resource to get all of that going. And was super, super pleased with that.
That's fantastic. And then I know you've also worked with Brian Park of Apeak. Can you talk a little bit about your work with him on the mental side of the game, which, we've been talking about quite a bit lately on this podcast?
Absolutely. So, yeah, he was someone my dad found out through, Apeak. We had the app, I don't know, a while ago, and then he offered the sessions, getting in and actually working with him and a coach. And so, yeah, we started using that, and I've been using it for probably over, 2 months now, a month and a half maybe. And that's been great because he knows the mental game of tennis so well that him being able to translate that to me has been great. And it's kind of a part, I know you guys have talked about it, but especially within juniors, the juniors don't talk about the mental game they're working on. You know what I mean? No one's at a tournament saying, oh, like I'm doing my visualization exercises, and no one's really talking about that. But it's such an important part of the game, and you see the pros like the Novaks and the Rogers and all those guys and how serious they took the mental game of tennis. And that's how, they become the best. So that's definitely something I've used to help elevate my game on court, is focusing on the off court stuff. And, he's jumped into topics that as a, high level junior, I hadn't really thought about much.
Can you give us some examples?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So like breath work and resetting between points, mental cues, all that kind of stuff. I worked a lot with him on visualizations, which the app does a great job of, because that will lead you through your visualizations. And working with him, he can see what you're doing on the app and can have you set goals on there on Apeak to, for however long. We're meeting every other week, so he gives me this 2 weeks to, really focus in and hone in on that goal. And then it'll recommend stuff for me to work on to help me reach that goal. And it's very user friendly and sets that up beautifully. So that's been a great resource. And then he's also worked with me on different parts of my game, like A game, B game, and C game. Not just having your one game style. Working on, if you're playing someone and your game's a little off, you're gonna have to adjust and that kind of stuff. And that's just stuff that I don't really think about. I was just go out and hit the ball over that and try and win. And once you get to these top levels of juniors, it doesn't work like that. So this has been great.
And I'm going to throw out a little ad for Apeak. We do have a discount code on our community discount page on parentingaces.com, which I'll include in the show notes for this episode as well. So if that is something that you've been considering to use with your child's junior tennis journey, we're trying to make it a little more cost effective for you. So definitely check that out. Bode, you said, the kids don't really talk about working on the mental side of the game. Why do you think that is? And what is something that maybe we can do to kind of remove the stigma? Or I hate to call it a stigma because I don't think that's what it is, but there's obviously some sort of barrier to feeling comfortable talking about the fact that you guys are all working on this very important piece of your tennis.
Yeah, I kind of noticed that, especially after working with Brian and working on my mental game, that it's such an important part and kids are talking about it. And I think that, one of those reasons is because, kind of like you said, it's almost kind of a taboo topic where kids are just, they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about how they're doing visualization exercises and things like that. And I think, the easiest way to change that is to, start talking about it, start going up to kids and being like, this is what I've been working on because I know you're working on the same thing, and, just kind of normalizing that a little bit, because it is such a major part of the game. And if the pros are doing it on national television, why can't you in a corner of Kalamazoo to talk about, some kid about your mental game and stuff like that? So I think that's just a super important part of junior tennis, especially, higher level junior tennis. And that's something that needs to be talked about more.
And I can tell you, a lot of college tennis teams are employing sports psychologists, are employing visualization, meditation, breath work, all the things that you're learning through Brian and Apeak. You're going to be like so many steps ahead of your teammates that maybe this is new for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I know Brian, on our intro call that we had with him, he was listing, the Power 5 schools that, he personally works with and the guys that he works with. And obviously a lot of those guys are foreign now. And that's, something that I think is super important, is getting that mental part of the game down. Because as a college coach, you're trying to get every edge you can over your opponent, and bringing that mental game into it is super, super important.
Right. So I want to talk about your particular recruiting process a little bit, because I think a lot of people are overwhelmed at the thought of just taking that first step toward recruiting, whether that's building your list of schools that you're interested in, whether it's writing that first email, sending that first text message. Can you walk us through kind of the big picture of how you got started and maybe the steps along the way that led you to your commitment at Xavier?
Absolutely. I think the first thing it started with was, knowing someone who's been through this, and working with someone who's been through this, like Danielle, to help you kickstart it. And she had me just make the broadest list of schools I've had, and literally went through tennis recruiting, and just any school that seemed remotely interesting, I put on the list, and found the email of the coach. And the biggest thing is just get started. Draft an email, run it by a coach who's seen it, and be like, yeah, like this is something that will stand out, and get those sent out, because that's the biggest thing. And then I think mentally, as a recruit, especially when I started this, don't expect every coach to respond within, right away, or even respond at all, because, they're busy and they have a lot going on. And if you kind of let that get to you, it's going to be a tough process, for sure, especially if you're 20 recruit in the country. So I think that's been, that was probably the biggest thing for me as far as getting started, was just drafting a list, getting these emails sent out, letting coaches know where I'm going to be, updating them regularly, like every month or every other month, with my tournament schedule, and anything that I had that was able to stand out. For me, I brought in my the fact that I played hockey for, so many years leading up to my final decision to focus on tennis, and kind of help that, use me as something to stand out. And just finding little things like that has been definitely helped. And then, as far as Xavier goes, my coach, Coach Rasco, came, and he was watching my doubles match in the second round of Kalamazoo. It was a late match. We were playing like the 12 seed, and we ended up losing this battle at the end. We lost in 3, but the Rasco was watching the whole time, and kind of introduced myself, shook my hand, and I think if I remember correctly, he was really watching my partner, and wasn't watching me. And then, introduced myself to him, and my friend had already been kind of in communications with him. And then that was kind of the start to the whole kickoff with Xavier. And then once I kind of had my schools down that were, showing interest in me, and that interest that I had reciprocated back to them, that list had been taken down to probably 4 or 5 schools. And from then on, it was just, that's when it kind of moved away from the mass emails and more to the text, and, letting the coaches know, what I'm working on, and more updated updated tournament schedules, giving them, even like UTR checks, just stuff like that. Just like, this is where I'm at, kind of just keep them along with you in that process. And I think that's a big thing, is showing interest in the schools, consistently, and, texting them back, and all that has been really big. And then as far as Xavier goes, Coach Rasco was probably the coach I spoke to that I kind of clicked with the most. Even when we talk over the phone, and he's like, yeah, we got, this going on today, or this is what I'm looking forward to, and just stuff like that, like the little things that he was super, super good at communicating, and, consistently showing interest in me. And then it kind of just ended up working out. I had a tournament down in Cincinnati. It was an L3, I believe, and I went down there, and at the end of the tournament, I was down there with my partner who I was with at Kalamazoo, and we reached out to the coach, and he was like, stop by at Xavier, and we'll go on a quick unofficial visit. So right before our flight, that was at 5 or 6 o'clock that night, we scooted down to Xavier and got on campus, and that was the first campus I had been on for tennis recruiting purposes, and I got to see all the facilities, and I was like, oh, this is sick. So that was kind of the eye-opening moment for me. And then a couple months went by, and that kind of stayed at the top of my list, and I ended up being like, if I could go on and come down on an official and bring my parents to come, see the campus, and, if everything goes there, this is where I'm going to end up. And we got down there, flew down there, and had a great visit. That's when I kind of met all the guys on the team, got to watch a practice, and kind of get that full, college tennis experience. And then it was right after indoor nationals. He came and actually watched me at indoors. And then I got back home and made the call and officially committed. And that was probably the biggest, it's the biggest decision I made in my tennis career, for sure. But yeah, Rasco just made it, super easy, and can't thank him enough. I'm super excited.
That's so awesome. Can you also talk a little bit about Bode, what it's been like now that you have committed? What, if anything, has changed in the way you're approaching your training and your tournament schedule?
Yeah, absolutely. Now the biggest thing for me is just getting ready for that next step of college tennis, where I'm going to be playing 22-year-olds from Sweden who are really bigger and all that. And so yeah, for me, a lot of it's been working on like strength and stuff like that, trying to build also, mentally too, but as well as physically, because college tennis is just it's a different breed than juniors. So I've just been getting ready as much as I can for that. Right now I'm in high school season, so finishing up my senior year. We're actually supposed to have sections today and got rained out, but so team sections and then hopefully state as well. But yeah, as far as summer schedule goes, we're trying to play the men's open tournaments around us, because a lot of the college guys will come back and play those, and that's great for development and just getting matches in before I step on campus.
Yeah, that's
and now,
awesome.
Trying to get my ranking up as high as I can to get on these coaches' boards, as much as it is for me to just go out and play ball and do whatever I can to get ready. So
yeah, it's a different kind of pressure, I think, once you have committed. And like you said, now what you need to focus on. It's not about ratings and rankings any longer. It's about building your strength. It's about building your stamina and endurance. It's about bettering those little bitty things that can make the difference between winning and losing for your team. And on top of that, I'm sure there's a lot going on in terms of getting ready to move to a new place and meet a bunch of new people. And it's such an exciting time. I'm so happy for you.
thank you.
Scott, can you talk a little bit about how your mindset may or may not be different now that Bode has that commitment wrapped up?
Yeah, it's evolving. I say my mindset is evolving. If I put myself in the shoes of 12 months ago, he's been on a pretty significant journey. He's moved through otherwise pretty tough injury that he recovered from otherwise remarkably, really handled himself well through the summer and through that recruiting process. And so as a parent, you're there to support, but you can't go play the match for them. You can't go have the conversation with the coach with them. So you're really there just as a support and a sounding board. And frankly, my wife, who's still upstairs working, she's the best sounding board because she's just such a good listener. So when you do this parenting thing, you have two in that. If you have two in that game, to me it really has helped, because we see things a bit differently to try to get to the same end goal, which is to support Bode to its fullest. So I'm still involved with the tennis a bit, but he's really starting to take more of a driver's seat on everything from setting up. He sets up his own hits for the spring and the summer, and I go out with him much less than I did before. And it's, to his point, it's about strengthening and both mentally and physically, and then just being the best person he can be when he steps on campus when it comes to the college experience. And that's both academically and athletically. So he's still in the midst of taking Apeak tests in the last, couple of trying to get that wrapped up and enjoy these otherwise pretty cool weeks of before you graduate. So that's a little bit how my mindset's evolved, and we'll enjoy every moment of the tennis experience we can, because we obviously won't see as much in person being up here in Minnesota when he's down in Ohio.
Well, hopefully Xavier has access to live streaming for their matches, and if you can't be there in person, at least you'll be able to watch on your phone or your laptop.
Yeah, so that you bring up a good point. The exciting part about going there for Bode, I guess you can say this too, is that they're now working on the partnership with the Cincinnati Open. I know it has a different name now, but the facilities are very close to where Xavier is, and so that's where they're going to utilize those facilities. So they're going to have state-of-the-art, indoor courts with cameras and, have the access to the outdoor. And they have courts on campus as well, the outside ones and some ones close by that are indoor. But, if you're that close to that kind of facility, the university's made a good effort to be a part of it. So we'll be able to. You're right. We'll be able to watch live stream that. Yeah.
That's so great. What else am I forgetting to ask you guys that you want to share with us about this journey and about the role Parenting Aces has played for you? I know now I'm remembering, Scott, we were talking offline about kind of the whole parent network and you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I was gonna just add one extra comment around the parenting perspective on the mental game when you were talking with Bode about that.
Sure.
We spoke a bit about it in last year, where Bode was playing two sports at that time, and we just recognized that the mental side of just performance was important. So he got involved with someone more locally who was basically just working on generic performance management. And then as that evolved and he focused specifically on tennis, that was the connection to reach out in part to Brian and say, hey, let's dive into some of the more specific tennis related actions, activities you can do on the mental side. So I think if I could give advice to parents, it would be, if you're spending X per week on court physical, trying to do this with your son or daughter, consider doing at least this mentally or on the mental side for your son or daughter as well, because we all know that this is one of the most mentally tough, taxing, and rewarding sports you can play, but it's real. So I'll say that. But your question, your last question. So after we did the podcast, we put our information out there, and throughout the year, we've had other parents who have listened to the podcast and resonated on part of it or a lot of it enough to reach out and connect and talk about their son or daughter's journey. And it's happened on several occasions, which is great. And I think that's a testament to the Parenting Aces network. But just to share a couple of highlights, there was a parent in Arizona who was trying to figure out if they were going to stay there or they were going to go to a different part of the country. And they heard about what we were doing being in Minnesota and traveling, and so we talked about that. And then there was just a really nice mom from Canada who has a daughter who is equal parts tennis and soccer, and doing. When we get to these levels, a lot of the kids are just athletes, right? I mean, I think and so we spoke for 45 minutes about what that means as a parent to help support a multi-sport athlete, and if you make a decision and when, and what the coaches are saying, and if you do this and the coach isn't happy, then the coach may do this. It just, those sorts of things that are just real. It's just real, and that these things happen, but sometimes you don't feel like you always have a place to talk about that. And so hopefully this venue provides that kind of a network, so that others who are, whether they're a 12-year-old and figuring out if they're going to, try to invest more in XYZ, or they're 16 and they're, come heck or high water, want to play high-level D3 tennis or Division I tennis or whatever. I think these have a place to have a network like that is really helpful. So, and I can say the same. I mean, I've reached out to a number of the folks that you've had as guests to learn more about what they do, whether it's Danielle, Todd, Brian. I guess I'm forgetting all the folks you've reached out to learn more. But those are a few of them. David Howell at 7-Shot. I think that's a really cool technology. But and then just some of the folks you've had on even recently about talking more about the mental side of the game, and so really helpful.
I'm so happy. I love talking with you. You have been such a great supporter of Parenting Aces over the course of Bode's journey and your whole family's journey. Let's face it is a family effort. And I so appreciate you guys always kind of keeping me in the loop and Bode, I was thrilled to hear that you had found your college and that you had committed and that you're ready to go. And I'm excited to see what's in store for you once you step foot on Xavier campus next fall. And I hope you'll come back on and maybe check in with us during your freshman year and talk a little bit about what it's like to be a college tennis player versus a junior tennis player. I think that could be a fun episode.
Absolutely.
Cool, cool. Well, guys, thank you again so much for taking the time to chat with us, to share your journey with us, and to share the resources that you found through Parenting Aces and how you've used them. Because I think, for a lot of people, they see the stuff on social media, they may listen to the podcast, they may go on our website and read some of the articles, but understanding how to actually take those resources and put them to use to help your family go through this journey, I think is really helpful for you guys to share that experience with all of us. And I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks for doing what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And to my audience, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll catch you next time on Parenting Aces.